With lunch today, we got an amazing lineup of guests today. Before getting into the top of hour two, I think we have some breaking news on the president's Mideast plan. Frank, what's happening?
Well, quite a bit. The breaking news is that the president's legal team has just concluded opening arguments as tensions mount over witnesses, whether or not to call them. But the other story that we're following within the last hour is that the president has unveiled his peace plan for the Middle East. This is a pretty groundbreaking proposal. This has been agreed to by both parties in Israel. He's not only met with Prime Minister Netanyahu, but with his chief rival, Benny Gantz. And they both say they're on board with this, which would call for Israel to recognize an independent Palestinian state. So this would create a two-state solution where the Palestinians would get the capital of East Jerusalem, and it would have a tunnel go from Gaza to the West Bank. And this is the first time, as I understand it, that Israel has agreed to a Palestinian state with defined borders. Now, even before this plan came out, the Palestinians said they weren't interested in hearing about it because they weren't included in the construction of the plan. But you have both parties in Israel agreeing to it. This would be like Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump agreeing to something pretty groundbreaking.
All right. So there it is. There's the breaking news out of the Mideast. And, when you talk about the Mideast, you probably think about terrorism and all that stuff because it's always rampant there. And joining us right now is somebody who knows a heck of a lot about terrorism and the effects on our society and your family. Joe Conner joins us right now. He's the author of a new book, Shattered Lives, and it recounts the murder of his father in a bombing at Fraunces Tavern here in New York by a group led by Oscar Lopez, who's a hero of many politicians, including Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Joe, I want to ask you this. When you hear all this impeachment crap and this whole kabuki theater thing, and they're talking about abuse of power, abuse of power, abuse of power, tell me what your father was killed when you were 9 years old by a terrorist bombing. Tell me what you think when you hear abuse of power.
Well, what I think about is in 1999, when Hillary Clinton was going to be running for senator from New York, Bill Clinton gave clemency to the terrorists who murdered my dad. Now, they put out the story that they were nonviolent and all this crap, but it was BS. They were terrorists. They were leaders. They blew up Fraunces Tavern and 140 other bombs in the U.S. Clinton gave them clemency. It was outrage, if people remember. It was August 1999, and the Congress voted him down in a vote 99-2 or something like that, or 99-1 in the Senate. And I went down to D.C. to testify about what it meant to me and my family and Hillary Clinton's involvement. And Bill claimed executive privilege, and none of the FBI, the Bureau of Prisons, the DOJ, nobody was allowed to testify. So when I think about the abuse of power, first of all, he abused power by releasing terrorists to get his wife elected. And then secondly, he claimed executive privilege. So, I think executive privilege is a necessity of the president, but to use it now against Trump as an abuse of power, it's more than hypocritical. It insults the American people, and it derides the Constitution.
I want to bring Frankie in on this. Frankie, Alan Dershowitz made a very compelling case last night that abuse of power shouldn't even be included. But if the Democrats want to lean on it, where were they when Bill Clinton was abusing his power to affect the political race that Hillary was going?
Well, look, I've said a lot of this impeachment fervor is silly because the voters get to vote, and if they don't like Donald Trump, they can throw him out in a few months. But one of the leading candidates, not only in the Democratic polls, but a guy that's beating Donald Trump in a lot of states, is Bernie Sanders, now opening up a wide lead in both Iowa and New Hampshire, beating Trump in a lot of states if you go by the polls, which I have some questions about. But Bernie Sanders, I want to put up a photo, if we can, of Oscar Lopez Rivera, who was an FALN terrorist. And I'm wondering if you can tell us, Joe, when the debate about Oscar Lopez Rivera was raging, what was Bernie Sanders' view on the situation?
Oh, Bernie Sanders' view was release Lopez. Lopez is a freedom hero. He's a freedom fighter. He's George Washington. He's all those things. He's a murderer, and he's responsible for my father's murder. Like, you don't have to be the one who planted the bomb to be responsible. Bin Laden didn't fly the planes. But those pictures you just showed are right outside Francis Tavern immediately after the bombing. I found them on the New York Daily News expose about 2 years ago, and it's him. And there's just no doubt. Look closely, and you'll see. This is Lopez. And even if I'm not saying he brought the bomb in, but he came later, I believe, to survey what happened, to surveil what happened, and listen to what the police were saying. It's very common among terrorists and arsonists.
And Joe, before we run out of time, I just also want to pick your brain on Eli Manning, a longtime Giants quarterback, calling it a career after 16 years, won 2 Super Bowls. You've actually met Eli Manning.
I met Eli. I'm a Giant season ticket holder. My godson has leukemia and spent a lot of time at Hackensack Hospital. His name's Sean O'Malley. And Eli was there all the time. And I got to meet him. He's a gentleman. He did all this stuff very quietly. He's the epitome of a Giant, and I'm so happy I'm able to talk about him and Sean. Sean's doing great, and all the kids there just love him.
All right. Well, thank you, Joe Connor. If you're thinking about voting for Bernie Sanders, keep in mind that he supports Oscar Lopez, who is a known associate and was jailed and given clemency by Bill Clinton in the murder of Joe Connor's father. Check out Shattered Lives, Joe's new book. Joe, I want to thank you very much for joining us.
Anytime.
We're going to take a quick break right now. Quick one. Okay, take a look at this from our great friends over at Apex. And we're going to come back with Rich Hecker, who was part of the team that was trying to draft Mike Bloomberg to run for president in 2016.